Good day, Chairman, Mason, Brian. How's it going?
I'm good.
You guys look good.
Great.
And so I thought, if I ask you how you're doing, I thought I'd get a positive answer. And I did. Here we are. I just saw Mason was drinking what I can only assume is a cup of matcha. Or am I way off?
No. This is coffee. In fact,
But of all the podcasts, the many podcasts we've done, you've never once had matcha. But I thought I'd just take a stab in the dark today, because we're switching things up a little bit. We are going to talk today of all the segues I could have done. Today we are in the Miata. We are making our way to Tone Town, and if I could do, a little comparison here, a visual picture. We have multiple roads in front of us, and today we can take multiple roads at the same time. And this is an analogy, of course, for multi-effects. And multi-effects being one unit on your pedal board that you can do overdrive, distortion, reverb, delay, chorus all at the same time. Multi-effects on your pedal board. Are they worth it? What is currently on offer in the market today, and our thoughts on them? And essentially, for who might multi-effects be a good option, and for other people, maybe they aren't the best option. So, Brian, I'll throw it to you first. General thoughts for you personally, not for the general market, for you personally. Multi-effects, do you use them? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I do. In the for like multi-effects, I've done the H90, the H9. Would we say the Big Sky Timelines would be considered multi-effects?
Yeah,
of course. So I have those on my board right now. I have two separate boards. And I've used the HX Stomp. I've used a ton of different effects, multi-effects units, because, and I recommend them all the time, especially when you get into the HX Stomp, H90 realm. There's so many different sounds, and the great thing about those units is that they're good they're great units to have if you need that effect, especially if you need that effect only once or twice every so often. So yeah, I love it for that exact reason. Like the H90 is kind of like, or the H9 is kind of like that go-to. Every once in a while I need a pog, or every once in a while I need a chorus. I can easily dial it in without having to rip apart a board if I don't have my quad.
Yeah, quad being Quad Cortex.
Quad being Quad
do you
Cortex.
ATV to work most days?
No.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah. All right. Both work. Mason, what about you? Multi-effects, pros, cons. What are your thoughts for your personal rig?
well, I think again, going back to sort of the thesis of today, I think it's really about, I think for most viewers when it comes to multi-effects is it superior to individual pedals that might do those same things? So, as opposed to having an individual chorus, an individual univibe, an individual phaser, flanger, is getting something like a Mobius or fill in the blank, multi-effect unit in that style. Are those going to be worth it? Are they going to be close enough, or like who is the person where they're discerning to the point where they need to be able to get those individual effects, whereas who's the person that is going to be okay with the multi-effects? And I think the person that's on that fence of, do I buy these individual pedals or do I buy this multi-effects? I think that this is the person that's really going to get a lot out of the episode today. And as far as where I stand on multi-effects, I'm looking down at my pedal boards that I have here on the floor. And I guess the only multi-effect that I have on one of the boards is a collider from Source Audio, which has delay and reverb in a few different versions of each type of delay and reverb. And then on my larger Nashville board, which is kind of behind me, that has an M9. So not maybe the most sophisticated of the multi-effects comparatively to a lot of what we'll talk about today, but nevertheless, it is a big staple on a lot of Nashville boards because of the workflow of it. And some multi-effects, I'm sure as we'll talk about, can add some layers of complication to change settings quickly. And one of the reasons from Nashville session pros that I've talked to that say that they use the M9 as opposed to the more updated HX Effects, let's say, is that everything has a knob and they can very easily make adjustments because time is money. A lot of these guys are doing 3 sessions a day. They're being asked to, get a song together in a couple of hours. And so they just don't have time to go in and break out an iPad and try to deep dive for presets. They need to be able to turn knobs and kind of get the sound quickly. So, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that are, going to evangelize the Strymon thruple, the big sky
Strifecta.
Oh, is that what it's
There's
called?
so many names.
I thought it was the Strymon thruple.
The thruple is a little more controversial, but boy, does it really get your attention.
Well, you've heard it here first. The Strymon thruple. There's a lot of them. Big Sky, Timeline, Mobius.
Yeah.
And I have to say, there's a lot of very incestuous boards to that end that include all 3 of
You're
those
on fire, Mason.
effects. So I'll end my component of the conversation with that.
I actually wanted to, before we kind of get into it, last week we did an episode on kind of more, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, time is flying, beginner pedal boards. Like if you had to do a 5-pedal pedal board, what would you put on there for more beginner guitar players? And what kind of came up briefly was, well, would you just do like multi-effects? Is that good for beginner? And I remember I was thinking about this before the episode today. My first multi-effects was about, give or take, this makes me feel so old, 25 years ago when I started playing guitar, very early into it. I got a Boss GT1000. It was a goldish looking big multi-effects thing. And I had no sweet clue what I was doing with that thing. I hit buttons. I turned to different sounds. I turned it on, usually a high gain overdrive. I was like, man, this sounds so good. Back then, I have to be honest, the overdrive sounds on multi-effects, which were digital and still are, but they were pretty rough. And but my biggest thing was it was such a learning curve to learn that particular unit. And a lot has happened over the years with UX and how to actually get the sounds you want out of these things quickly. But it was not the most beginner-friendly unit. And I'm curious if you guys think, let's say we have the people listening that are newer into the pedalboard realm and they're deciding what they want to get, which is a common question I get to my inbox. I'm newer to pedals. What should I buy? Do you guys think in general with what is on offer today, not 25 years ago, is a multi-effects unit a good option for people that are just getting into the pedalboard realm? I have my own thoughts on this, but I want to throw to you guys first. Like, Mason, what do you think as far as you have every effect out there available to you in this one unit? Is that a good approach or not?
I think that if you really just want to learn what's out there, something like this could be good. But I think that you would want to maybe go with a more basic incarnation. So again, thinking back to like the M9, maybe start with an M5, which is like a single effect version of an M9. Or like the latest incarnation from Line 6 is the HX1. I think the HX1 might be difficult to use because it does require some understanding of, their menu and things like that. Whereas on the M5, everything is on the face of the effect. And you have all of the distortions and delays and reverbs and all that stuff. Now, you can't use them all at the same time, but it would allow you to start to develop a vocabulary and an understanding of some of the basics of certain effects and what certain controls do. And so then that way, when you started to go to buy individual pedals, you could start to kind of fill in some of those blanks without having to kind of like, you make the mistake that Grant and I made where we bought a compressor and couldn't figure out what it did. I think that would kind of head off some of those initial, sort of anticlimactic, pedal upsets, so to speak.
Yep.
And I think the good thing about it too is if you bought something like that, this could always come in handy later on. Like I noticed on Mark Lettieri's board that Brian did, I think he used an M5 at one point as kind of like a pedal of the day sort of thing, where he could use it to fill in gaps. If he needed an octave, all of a sudden it could do that, or if he needed a phaser, all of a sudden it could do it, and it replaced the need for him to use an individual effect. Or if you're using something like a RJM PBC 6X or something that has a movable order, an effect like an M5 or an HX1, again, just speaking, including that in there just because it's an individual effect that does a lot of things, maybe it's not as simple. Those are really helpful on pedal boards as a multi-effect usage because, again, you can put it wherever you want it as you need it, and you don't need to have separate effects to cover sort of these more one-off type sounds. And I think that they're really useful for that. Where it's like one song requires this one thing and it would be really large and cumbersome to use on your pedal board. That's where something like this really shines, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree completely with Mason. I think there's also a level of like a level of like, how I want to say it. Like there's a level in which you should come in on a multi-effects unit, especially if you're starting out, because if you're starting out and you get like me, like I said, I had the Digitech RP50 when I started, and that was a multi-effect pedal. Didn't know how to use the crap out of it at all. Literally had no idea. 10, 15 years later, I plugged it in and I can figure out and I can make it sound decent. But like, getting into something, I always suggest not going for the biggest and baddest, the glitzy type of unit all the time, just because it's going to have so many options and it's going to get confusing. You're going to spend more time on figuring out the pedal than you are going to be playing sometimes. I've had plenty of times that I've had pedals. I think the easiest multi-effect pedal I've had that I've tried, and I was like, oh, that's actually really easy, was like this TC Electronics Plethora or something really simple that only had a couple sounds that you could cue up or whatever. But for like those one single pedal that can do different effects, the M5, like what Mason was saying from Mark used it exactly like that. He's like, yeah, sometimes you need a chorus, or I can bank up and I have an octave sound, or I have this or whatever. Like that's really convenient. I think I had the Helix for a couple of minutes, then I have it for very long, just because I had a lot of stuff, and at my point in time, I was like, that's too much. So I got like the HX Stomp, which in that realm of pedals, it starts to get confusing because then you're messing with signal chain and in the exact order in which the pedal is, which is not a bad thing. But if you're starting out, you don't really know the exact order unless you're listening to a podcast or watching someone that has explained. So yeah, starting off, I think it's a great thing to have. It also helps you hone in the type of effects that you know and you love, to where you can then turn around and get that as like an analog pedal if you want, or a single pedal, not analog, but like a single pedal off to the side or something. So yeah, I think they're great.
Cool. I want to get into kind of what's currently on offer for multi-effects. And this is kind of, by no means is this going to cover the industry. Like there are so many multi-effects units out there. These are probably some of the ones that we would see on pedalboard setups and are, a little bit more in front of our face, I would say, on a week-to-week basis. But before we get there, I want to throw to Mason for some of our sponsors that make this podcast possible.
Let me tell you about a few of our sponsors that make the podcast possible every single week. One of which are our friends over at the Guitar Sanctuary, McKinney, Texas's own premier guitar dealership. All things boutique, whether we're talking about Mesa Boogie, Sir, and beyond. They have all that gear, including a lot of the multi-effects with which we are going to be speaking of today. do check them out over at theguitarsanctuary.com. Pay them a visit online or go in person in McKinney, Texas. Maybe you'll run into Andy Timmons. He's there quite a bit. And enjoy all of their offerings, whether it's from Vertex, Goodwood, and beyond. They are an amazing retail establishment and have everything that you may need as far as your tone is concerned. Also, our friends over at Neural DSP. Now, Neural is offering our listeners a very special 30% off any one of their plugins. And rumor has it that at some point in the near future that any of the existing plugins may be available to include on your Quad Cortex. And speaking of Quad Cortex, did you know that the Quad Cortex is now $1699.99? It went through a drastic price drop to make it even more affordable, and I would say has the best amp simulations out there already native in it. Being able to add in something like some of these beautiful plugins would just be icing on the cake. I used the plugins. I used the Quad Cortex when we shot our video with Jubu Smith, one of the godfathers of 90s R&B guitar, on the Mount Rushmore of R&B guitar. He was using some of the great native plugins, or I guess great native pieces of software that are already implanted into the Quad Cortex. We used a modified version of the Roland JC120. I also captured a Ampeg rocket, a reverb rocket on there that we used. Absolutely amazing sounding. Those will also be available to the public because you can make these available through the is it Cortex Cloud?
Yep.
Neural Cloud. So I have them available on the Vertex version of that. It's all free. So be sure to check that out. Definitely check out the plugins, neuraldsp.com. Get 30% off using the code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN. Now back to Grant for multi-effects talk.
All right. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's on offer currently in the multi-effects realm. The first one I wanted to chat about is, we've already kind of brought it up briefly, the Line 6 HX1. And this is a multi-effects unit that you can essentially run one effect at a time. It's kind of the updated version of the M5, if my understanding is correct. One effect at a time, lots of controls, obviously presets, there's MIDI, stereo in, out, all that type of thing. But what are your guys' thoughts on the HX1? Maybe even let's include in this Line 6 multi-effects as a whole. What are your thoughts on it, how it applies to the HX1 and beyond?
I love the M5 version. Like, I love the M5. I think it's a great pedal. So when I saw this, I immediately was like, oh, it's it feels like an updated M5.
Yep.
And I've seen seeing a new pedal coming out, the company puts all their production and stuff into making the best announcement video and trailer, and it sounds great. And there's been plenty of times where, companies have done that, and then you get the pedal and you're like, that doesn't sound as great as they make it sound. And, I watch more like unboxing videos where people directly unbox it, plug it straight in, and out of the box play it. And I was really surprised to hear how great it sounded. I mean, there is a finesse, I guess you could say, to these pedals with dialing them in sometimes the way that you want. But I will always say it. You will have a significantly easier time dialing in pretty much any pedal as long as you know the tone you're looking for, the sound you're looking for. If you're just guessing on the sound that you want or the effect that you want, you're going to do it for hours. Like, I've had people like, I just can't seem to get this right. Okay, well, what exactly are you looking for? I don't know. Well, that's your first problem. So like this thing with the screen and the controls and the menu options, obviously it's an updated screen. It's easier to see. It's a great unit. I can see the MIDI on the side. Like they did a great job updating the whole unit. It looks around the same size. I'm trying to remember.
M5, it looks close.
Yeah,
and M5 was a bit bigger
to me.
This is
M5
probably
is bigger.
30% smaller than the M5.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, I would love to try one of these for the reasons that I outlined above, and also the display is the Adriatic delay, which
Yeah.
I'm really curious what that is. Is that like an Italian delay if it's like going to the left, or is it like a Bosnian or a Montenegro or a Croatian
who's to
delay
know?
when it's on this side? It depends. You get a multicultural
Experience.
European delay.
Yeah. I will
Adriatic.
say, I'd be curious what you guys think about this. And again, I'm always happy to disagree or be disagreed with on the podcast. I think it's a good thing. But my biggest issue with Line 6 as a whole, this is a very generic and personalized statement, my opinion.
Okay.
They do good algorithms, but they aren't great. This is my opinion. As in, let's say you compare the Adriatic delay, which I have no idea what kind of delay that is. Mason has a much better handle on this than I do.
It's an Italian
obviously.
delay, I think.
An Italian delay. So you have Line 6's take on an Italian delay. Then you go over to the pedal we're about to chat about, which is going to be the Eventide H90, and you listen to their Italian delay. Almost certainly, the Italians themselves are going to be happier with the Eventide algorithms. They just sound, in my opinion, more realistic or more true to the real piece of gear that it's trying to emulate. Richer, thicker. I don't know. There's just something. There's just something about the algorithms on Line 6. I'm like, they're 85, 90% of the way there. But that last little bit, they just fall a bit short for me. I don't believe this about their amp modeling. Like, I think the amp modeling is great, but I've never fully connected. And I'm curious if that is just a me thing and it's just my personal taste, or if you guys have experienced something similar. I'd be, very, very interested to hear your thoughts, since we are going through, what's on offer, pros and cons. This, for me, when I see a Line 6 comp, I would definitely use it. But I know I'm just going to be wanting just a little bit on some of their algorithms.
Yeah, I would agree. I think my reference point is like the HX Stomp that Line 6 has. And I would say, I would be a good comparison to say that some of these sounds are probably also in the HX Stomp. And when I had the, when I had the unit, there was always it sounds really great, but I was always missing, or I was always needing something. So when I got the HX Stomp, I had to download third party IRs to make the amp sound a little bit better like I wanted. So there was little things, and then I found, to make it sound even better, the reverb's good, but instead I like the Big Sky. There's little comparisons. So I do agree. From what I've heard from the HX1, and I had one in very, very quickly, and just kind of scrolling through the sounds, they sound good. It really comes down to that comparison when you're putting by itself, it sounds great. Some minor tweaks, but when you start putting it next to this, it's an HX1 next to a Big Sky. If you were to turn on a Big Sky preset versus an HX1 preset, the Big Sky reverb preset is probably going to sound better. Not saying that the HX1 is bad. I just think their characteristics will be different.
Well, I think it's just Line 6 has their sound. Strymon has their sound. You hear a reverb or delay on a record, and you can pretty quickly pick, they're using a Timeline or a Big Sky, because it's just so ubiquitous now in the industry that it's a recognizable sound. And even now, I feel like I'm getting a little bit over the Strymon sound just because I've heard it so many times over and over and over again. It's just nice to hear something a little bit different. And that's where, I don't know. I've used the HX Stomp and really enjoyed it. I had it on my board for years, but it was just always, it's so close. It's so close, but it's just not. It's just coming up a little short for me. Mason, any thoughts before we move on?
As far as line 6 is concerned, I don't know that I don't know with any multi effects that I really hold it accountable to like the thing that it's representing, because like I already know that it's a shortcoming. So I kind of operate within, it's going to be a tape echo simulation. We know it's not going to be a tape echo, but how do we sort of get the most out of it that we can?
Yeah.
I've always found that they're pretty good for what my expectations are for the thing that it's doing. Again, with something like this, the HX1 or the M5, which is the previous incarnation, I'm looking at them more as just a problem solver that would prevent me from needing to use multiple additional pedals to serve this one purpose.
Yep.
And I don't know that I've ever shot the HX1 or the M5 out against another individual size multi effects. I kind of think that in the M5 range, there really wasn't many competitors for them in that offered that range, at least at the time, offered that range of effects in a single unit. But I would suggest, Grant, you let Mr. Six know, and in line is short for Lionel Six.
Lionel 6.
And let him know that
he's an intimidating man.
His algorithms are not quite up to standard. And by the way, Adriatic delay, I realized, is the Echo Rec, because that was made in Italy.
There you go.
So I think that's what that is.
Okay. Good call.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's keep moving, because there are a few I want to get through here. And I think this next one is going to highlight something I do personally love about multi-effects, especially these days. Maybe not back in the M5, earlier days of multi-effects. But on screen, if you are listening, we have the Eventide H90, which is the kind of next in line after the smaller H9. The thing I love about multi-effects and the H90 highlights is the power of signal routing. And the H90 especially has multiple stereo inputs, multiple stereo outputs. So you can actually route it in multiple spots on your pedal board. And, so you could route the H90, let's say you have a pedal board that goes into a compressor. Still have no idea what a compressor does. Then it goes into the H90, and maybe you program effects to show up in spot 1. Maybe you put a rotary in there, or a univibe, or some sort of gain-based effect. Then you go through your overdrives, like individual overdrive pedals. So you go back out of H90, route in more dry effects, a boost of volume. Then you come back into the H90, maybe in stereo now. And now you have your chorus and your flanger and maybe a delay. And you can program delay sounds to now show up in this spot whenever you hit that preset. And so the signal routing that you have available in multi-effects is one of the more powerful aspects of current, modern day multi-effects units. It's probably not the sexiest option, but if you think about having a multi-effect like the H90 that can do hundreds of sounds, and now you can route those sounds in multiple spots on your pedal board, it can be a game changer. And so any additional thoughts on the H90, Eventide algorithms, experience you have with H9 or H90 that you guys want to kind of bring up? Why someone might choose this over something else?
I think for this unit, if you're gonna buy it, you have to go in knowing you're gonna have to look through the manual. You're gonna have to get connected to the app. You're gonna have to connect to the desktop software, whatever you're connecting it to, because I think out of the box, it's a phenomenal unit. It sounds great, it looks great, everything, and it's built well and everything. I just think like having the H9 in the past helped me understand how this works. Mm-hmm. If you were to buy it as your first multi-effects unit, you would have a bit of a learning curve, because there's some stuff on it that you're just like, you're having to figure out, like, oh yeah, it is, you can do A or B sounds, but can you do them individually? Oh no, they're linked together, and you're having to go in and route them. You can do all the routing. There's a ton of options, but I just think it's one of those, like, I had one client, he's like, yeah, I just want to be able to dial up this sound and just press it. I'm like, okay, well, it takes a little bit more than that. Like, you're going to have to go in and tweak the sound, recall that number from your controller, and it just became too much for him. So like we had switched him to like something a lot more simpler. I think it's a phenomenal unit though. It sounds great. Just know going in, you're going to have to do the research. It's not, it isn't out of the box. You can start playing on the sounds, but if you're like, okay, I want this type of sound, you can scroll through it and probably find it pretty quickly. But like if you're really gonna fine tune stuff, like I will say all the external extra controls and knobs are really handy, but really dialing stuff in, the iOS app and stuff just takes it a whole new level. So, and I've seen some people do some crazy stuff with it. It's just like Josh Smith. He has one on his board and he has it pulled up with the Morningstar MC6, the original one, the version 1, and he has it pull up different sounds, but those different sounds also have different combinations with other effects in the H90. So it can do a ton of stuff. Just like I said, it's definitely something you're going to have to open the manual, understand it, figure out how the workflow you want it and the routing, because it's crazy.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, certainly one of the more advanced things, I think that, I was watching something from Eventide recently where they said, most people think this is just two H9s, but really what it is like a miniature H9000, which is like a $8,000 or $10,000 rack unit,
Yeah.
So, it's pretty sophisticated. I would never tell anybody to jump off the deep end on this one for their first. Again, the simplicity of the M5 for a beginner is critical, I think, because it's just so simple and it's really hard to screw up. You could get yourself into a lot of trouble if you don't understand things like parallel routing or, all the routing of different multiple inputs and outputs. But from a more advanced player standpoint, this is kind of the upper echelon of what our industry has to offer. Eventide designs aerospace, equipment.
Yeah.
And so, you have some of the finest engineers, I think they're based in New Jersey, that New Jersey has to offer. And so these are incredible and they do so many things and they sound great. The only thing that I've said about Eventide, and this is generalized across most of their pedals, is they don't have an analog dry path. So you just have to be aware of that in certain circumstances. If you're planning to run a wet, dry, wet rig or something like that, and you're utilizing this, you have to use a mixer. Otherwise, you'll have a pretty brutal latency that you'll notice. If you're just running through this straight through, and you don't have a dry reference without it, you probably will never notice the latency because it's as good as you could hope for in any digital effect. But if you have a reference point for the dry signal without the H90 in it, then you'll of course notice that there's a difference in the latency between the dry and what's running through the H90. But that's not necessarily, that would be true of any digital product that doesn't have analog dry through. So just keep that in mind. That's probably not going to be the majority of people listening to this. So don't think that, if I run this in my signal path, all of a sudden I'm going to have this latency issue. You won't, so long as, again, you're not referencing it against a dry, unaffected signal.
Yeah.
Nice. And I would say I've got a bit of a crush on Eventide algorithms. I think they are some of the best sounding.
Absolutely.
But,
Without question.
As far as the user interface, I have a bunch of H9s. I think I have 3 or 4 across their different shops.
Grant keeps one on his person.
All times. It's actually my keychain.
Hanging from your keychain.
Yeah, I have big baggy pants to make it work, and so my fashion sense is stuck
Cargo
20
pants.
years ago.
Yeah,
but I will say I have never learned how to use the H9 on the pedal itself. Whenever I need to program anything, I open up my phone, I connect to a Bluetooth app, and I've only ever learned how to use it there. Because as far as using it on the pedal, there are so many menus and sub-menus and things you have to kind of know how to do. I just never bothered. And opening up the app is really easy. So I would say, I would assume, and from what I've heard from a lot of customers that use the H90, this is a little bit better as far as user interface on the pedal. However, like Brian alluded to, it is a complex unit and there is a lot to get your head around. So it's not something you are going to pull out of the box and 5 minutes later you've got it sorted. Like, give yourself a few days to really get into it, because it is based on rack style effects, and the routing for rack style effects is complex if you're just getting into it. So beautiful pedal. We got to keep moving. This next one, if you are listening, we just brought up the hologram Chroma console. As far as looks and vibe go, I mean, what a unit. This has 4 kind of channel strip type sections on it. A red called character, a yellow called movement, green called diffusion, and blue called texture. And you can basically dial these up as 4 individual effects in any combination, turn them off, turn them on, create presets, all that type of thing. I think personally, this is a really cool unit, although I have to preface that I do not have any personal hands-on experience with it. Mark Johnston on YouTube and Instagram does a really in-depth video on this on YouTube. I think it's like a 2-hour video going through the Chroma console. Does a really good job on it. It sounds awesome. Like, really cool take as far if we're talking about algorithms, what this has to offer, especially in the overdrive realm as well in a multi-effects unit, is really cool and kind of a unique approach to multi-effects. Any experience you guys have with this as far as setups, what customers have said about it, in general, your thoughts on this thing?
I'll jump in and say I've set this up on a couple boards. It's a very cool unit. It definitely, not that it takes a lot of time to figure out, because it's pretty self-explanatory that's the cool thing about their stuff, is that a lot of it is on the surface level. Like, you don't have to hold the foot switches to turn the knob to do all these extra settings, which I wouldn't be surprised if that was an option. It's definitely one of those things that you have to know what you're going to want, because it can do all these different combinations of stuff. I had it for a very short time, and the guy already had a bunch of presets, so I didn't want to mess up his presets. But the stuff that we were messing with, it could do some really wacky kind of sounds. But it sounded cool. It's a stunning enclosure. The look of it, everything is really awesome on the unit. I don't exactly know what the price of it is.
I think it was around $499-ish, but I could be off.
Yeah, but like the whole
$399. $399 US.
$399. So like the whole user interface
used for $500. There's more
limited supply here.
right. But like the back, I also like their approach that they don't have anything on the sides. That's like a huge thing for me. So like it's very pedalboard friendly. The MIDI, power, input, output, everything is on the back. Makes it really simple. Obviously going into the manual, you can do, when you're powered up, you can do some different like routing, or I think you can set the inputs and outputs. So there's some different stuff that like their other pedals can do. But I think it's a great unit. I don't think I would ever put it on my board, just because it's just, for me, it's one of those like extra pedals. Like, I'm a very meat and potatoes type of player when it comes to like pedals.
And this is more of a sushi. Is that fair?
This is like a sushi mixed with Mexican mixed with Italian. There's just all like, it's like a buffet,
an amalgamation of cultures.
It's Texas Japanese.
It's Texas Japanese with a fusion.
I would say as well, for like Hologram as a whole, Hologram the company, they are. I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out the other side of this coin. But one side of the coin for Hologram is kind of like in the Chase Bliss realm. They do a different, very purposefully different take on common effects. So it's not going to be your standard, delay sounds, although I'm sure they can do some of those as well, or your standard reverb. Like, it's a little bit more glitchy. It's a little bit more wacky, for lack of a better term. It's a unique take. And because of that, it probably pulls out of you as the player a different approach to what you would normally do for your guitar lines. Like, it will force you to think a little bit differently. But I would say if you're wanting something like a standard multi-effects, I just want my normal delay, my normal reverb, normal chorus.
You'll
I want
hate
it all
this.
in a box. It's probably not going to be this unit.
Correct.
What did you say, Mason?
So you probably hate this then.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah. But I mean, as far as like a left of center kind of multi-effects unit that's basic for a pretty fair price, I'd have to say, this thing is awesome. Like it could really be your thing. But I do like how approachable this one looks in comparison to other multi-effects. There's no screen on it. There are 8 knobs, 2 foot switches, and a couple of 4 extra little buttons that light up, and that's about it. Like it looks like you will be able to get your head around it a bit quicker.
Those just take you through the different options, like the push button LEDs.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I've seen on it, one of my friends and an amazing artist, Christian Curria, check him out if you want to have some beautiful R&B vibes. He bought one, and Tom Bukovac, another friend, bought one, and I think somebody brought it to him, and he ripped this thing to shreds. And people
really?
accused him of not knowing how to use it, and he's like, "Listen, I've been using pedals for 50 years. Like, don't tell me I don't know how to use this thing."
Oh my gosh!
But again, I have no idea. It looks, it looks cool. But I think it's for people that are trying to sort of emulate like a channel strip sort of vibe on their pedal board, and they want to have that sort of thing. Is this going to be the same, as a channel strip? Like, no, of course it's not. But yeah, I mean, you have to really be committed to like this sort of format. I'm sure that if you wanted like tweakability, I don't know how it could ever compete with like an H90 or something like that.
Yeah.
But somebody out there is going to want this aesthetic. They've bought into the vibe. They're hipsters. They're going to love this. This is going to go great with their Crocs and all that
and
stuff.
half the price of an H90 if we're going with that comparison. Like it's like H90 is what, $800 something, $850 somewhere around there, and this is $400.
I mean, I'd be down to trying it in proving myself wrong.
Mr. Hologram.
But I mean, I feel like this is something that you have to be like into this to go for it. This wouldn't be like an everyman pedal.
No.
No.
Agreed.
No, I follow this guy on Instagram. His name is Jake. Funny story. I found out that he lives like 30 minutes from me, which it's always funny when you follow people social media and then you end up finding out that they live closer than you think.
Well, you guys can have a lunch date and talk to him about this.
We can talk about it. He has this on one of his boards, and I've seen, from what I can hear in the videos he puts out from him playing, like he uses it in very unique ways. And I think that's a thing too, is like I've seen this pedal on a client's board. He's a keys player, but he has like 30 pedals on a board, and he's experimenting with different sounds, and he's turning the knobs and going through the different coloring and everything. And it's, it's a really cool pedal. I agreed with you guys on, if you were to get it, there would be more of a learning curve to this too. Yeah.
Cool. Guys, we are going to be coming towards the end of this, but I don't think it would be an episode on multi-effects without talking about Strymon. Before we get there, I'm going to throw it over to Brian. Brian's going to tell us about the last 2 sponsors that make the podcast possible, and then we'll get into Strymon and where they are currently.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so our final 2 sponsors are going to be the guys over at monocreators.com. Mono is great. I literally just, as we were talking, had multiple mono boxes be delivered to the shop. Literally just walked in. And their quality of their cases, their angled boards, their power supplies, their gig bags, their backpacks, everything is just top notch. It's quality over quantity when it comes to a lot of this stuff, especially the money that you're spending on these cases. They're phenomenal, worth the money. You can use the discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 10% off. That's great deal, especially with the quality of their stuff. You won't be disappointed. Go check out the guys at monocreators.com. Check them out on Instagram, social media. You won't be disappointed. Last but not least are the guys over at Bestronix or btpa.com. Bestronix Brad, Best Brad, whatever we call him, whatever his nickname is. We love him. He's great. Brad is awesome. He's always, I'm constantly calling him to ask him about custom heat shrink I need, or cabling, or connector looms, or any kind of stuff that I need. He can handle it. The guys over at Bestronix are great. They also build racks and stuff, so they do a ton of different rack panels and patch panels and stuff, pedal train panels. So go check them out at btpa.com over in Chicago. Use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off. You won't be disappointed. Chairs, you won't be disappointed. And they even supply me with those 2.1 right angle power connectors to do all my custom cabling for powers. So check them out. Won't be disappointed.
I actually I may have mentioned this last week, but I posted something on Instagram a little while ago about a board I did, and I had like coiled up a USB cable because I didn't have any custom USB stuff. And Brad commented on it saying, "Hey, we got some like rewirable USB cables if you want them." I was like, "Yep, what? Send me the parts, send me send me some samples." And sure enough, they're awesome. And so even Brad's even now trolling me on Instagram.
That's amazing.
And getting me part numbers before I ask for them. He's on it.
Everywhere.
He's good.
He's everywhere.
He is literally everywhere.
He's just looking out for what's best.
There you go, for my Tronics.
For your Tronics.
Yep. Is it easy to wire? Is that USB easy to wire?
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah.
Oh, man.
The solder connections are a little close together, so you got to be careful you don't bridge any connections. But after you get that, after you test them out, they're actually pretty good, pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So before we get into the Strymon, where is Strymon as far as, are they still the industry leaders for multi-effects, or have they been overtaken? Predictions maybe for Strymon. I'm very curious. I have some questions for you guys. Any honorable mentions? I had a long list of multi-effects that we could have chatted about, and any honorable mentions that you guys would like to quickly talk about before we get into Strymon. I'll start. My first honorable mention of multi-effects that are kind of, has caught my attention, and I think the algorithms are sounding very good from personal experience as well, is the Maris LVX, which is kind of like a multi-delay thing, and the Maris Mercury X, which is like a multi-reverb. Very cool look. I'll bring up the LVX on screen for those watching. It's kind of like a screen in the middle. The thing that caught my attention on this was the launch video. Unbelievable launch video and kind of assets around it. And then they also have, I'll bring
they
out
went
the
to
Mercury.
Mars to shoot that thing.
They actually, like the budget, it's just them and Elon, and they pulled it off. And then the Mercury X, obviously very same look, just in a dark blue. But that's kind of, again, they have some of the standard sounds in here for both delay and reverb, Mercury X and LVX, but also some very glitchy, unique, where does that sound come from type algorithms built in as well. So those are two honorable mentions for me. Any that you guys would mention as far as things you'd want to just put out there for people to look into further on their own time?
Source Audio, for I'd say
the Collider.
I think Collider, but I think all their stuff is great. The Nemesis is great. Ventress Reverb is great.
Yeah.
I think, and of course the Collider. I think that those are all really great. I would say though, like again, just like about Strymon, I still think that they're, even though I don't use Strymon stuff personally, I still think that they have the best user interface, ease of use, features, and of course they sound good. If they didn't, people wouldn't be using them. And so I think that they're pretty unbeaten in that terrain. And if they came out with an M9 equivalent that kind of bridged all of their effects together, sort of thing. I mean, that I could see why they wouldn't, because they wouldn't want to pull any sales from their individual effects. But if they did that, imagine if there was something that could replace the Strymon thruple, and it was just one unit and it was roughly smaller than the Strymon Timeline, Big Sky, and Mobius.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think of how many just church players alone
more than 10 at least.
would uproot their entire pedal boards and put that on there.
Yeah,
and maybe that's what they're going to call it. They're going to call it the thruple. So Strymon, you can have that one for free. I want
first one's for free. No, I agree with the Maris stuff, and the Source Audio stuff, the Ventress, like all those, like the Ventress out of the box is awesome. I've had some really great sounds out of it, and I've gotten stuck on that pedal playing through it, and it's great. It sounds awesome, and they're easy to wire and easy to program and everything. I've had a little bit of experience with that Bebo polydigit pedal that we talked about.
Yep.
Bebo. See, that's how much I had with it. Bebo. Bebop. And I had some experience with that. I haven't had any experience with their newest reverb pedal that they just released, that I have been told by many clients that it's amazing. And that's the most I've had it. They were at NAMM when I was there, but there was people constantly there, so I never got a chance to go mess with it. Their stuff is really cool. I mean, Josh Smith has a flat five with it, and he loves it. So it's a great unit. But yeah, no, I think all those are fantastic units. I could see Strymon coming out with something new, either a new device or an updated device or something like that. The thruple, I mean, that's great. I mean, you never know. But yeah, no, I think those, I think all those are great options. There's some other stuff like the TC, the Plethora stuff is great too. I mean, to be honest, like, it's really simple. Mark Lettieri it's the funniest thing. Very quick side note. We put the Plethora on a cutting board, this white little plastic cutting board with like a Strymon Ojai and a couple of his pedals that we put into the effects loop, and he threw it in his backpack, and he would take that over for his awesome European gigs. And he's like, for what it is, it gets me the sounds I need. It has, all those screens and everything is really cool, and then they update it with the tuner and stuff. So their stuff is also really cool, and it comes in that smaller 3 form factor too now. But yeah, they all make great stuff.
That's cool. I think the way that Strymon is heading with their small box, like they have the Strymon, let's call that big box, like L Cap, which would be kind of their medium-sized pedals, and now like the what's the super small? Like you have Brig and
the Cloudburst, and
they're
Ultra
super tiny,
Violet.
But to get that size and the control that they want, they have given up one of the key things that they're really good at, which Mason has pointed out. They're really, like the Timeline, super easy to use. It's really intuitive, really easy to save presets and get your sounds, and like you can get that up and running quite quickly. But now with these smaller units, and to get the deeper kind of controls and edits that you might need is harder to get away with, and it's harder to do quickly, and the MIDI is a little bit harder to implement. And I'm not saying that's like Strymon missed the boat. I just think that as you shrink down the size, you have to give something up, and the user interface is often part of it. Now you need to get into hold down this foot switch, unplug the power, spin around 3 times, and turn this knob to change the effect level. That wasn't the case with the bigger units that can have more knobs and more hardware on board. And so that's where a bigger unit with multiple effects in it from Strymon, I think, would be awesome. But I just hope, if that ever happens, it may never happen. If that ever were to happen, I would hope that they kept the user interface really easy to use and not give too much of that up for the sake of size. That would be my only observation there.
If we don't get a multi-effect of them, I at least want a dual engine, like to be able to stack 2 reverbs, because there's been plenty of people that have been like, oh yeah, Big Sky's cool, but my RV 500 can do 2 different reverbs at once.
Which
and
we
I'm
didn't mention the RV 500.
The RV the 500
units,
stuff,
the 500
the 200s, even the 200 series are great. But like that's the argument I have with people.
Except for the reverb, apparently.
Oh really?
Yeah, Corey Congilio, shout out to him. He like figured out that there was some sort of glitch in it where it like cuts the signal by I can't
A few
remember,
dB.
6 or 8 dB.
Oh, wow.
When
Significant.
just by
Wow.
running through it, and he bought another one like from a Guitar Center and tried it, and it's the same thing. So I guess some people are not listening to their pedal boards, their pedals in isolation before they put them on their
guess
boards,
not.
because how many people have probably put an RV200 on their board,
no.
and then it's just like attenuating the signal pretty significant.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that about that 200.
Only the
That's-
RV. I don't think this is true
wow.
of the DD or MD or whatever. But
Yeah.
the Boston's are great. The DD 500 is one of my favorite delays.
Yeah.
I used it for many years until the the Eddie Van Halen. What is it? The
Yeah.
SD came
SD3000.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the only ever argument I have with people. Is like, well, I can do 2 delays at once. I'm like, brother, I only need 1 delay at a time. Like, that's not for me. But like, I would love to either see that. I would see the what did you call it? The truffle. Well, what did you call it? Thruple, even better. Truffle.
The
I
truffle?
was driving truffle.
The truffle.
That's high class. I mean, yeah, why not?
I mean, hey, but like I could see that. I could either see them doing something like that or doing like a dual engine, which a dual engine would be great. So that's me.
Guys, this is us. This
is
is the multi-effects episode. Multi-effects are not going to be for everyone, but I think if we can all agree here that they can be a great placeholder for multiple pedals that you don't need to use all the time, a multi-effects unit can be awesome. On the fence, I'm personally on the fence if it's good for a beginner or not. I think I would still rather pick 3 or 4 individual pedals and get a feel for what the analog version sounds like first. That's my personal take. But I think there are instances like the M5, maybe even the M9, where it's super easy to use, super easy to get your head around very quickly, and could be great for beginner. Any quick final thoughts, Brian or Mason? How are you guys feeling about the multi-effects? You feel like we covered our bases today?
Yeah, I would just say do your research, know what you want to get, have an idea, and
And ask us if
Be
you're
prepared.
confused. This will be up on YouTube. Put it in the comments. Ask us questions. And if you're a little confused by any of this today, we'll do our best to help you out. Mason, you want to close us out?
I would just say for all of you out there that are multi-effect curious, they have their place. Will they ever replace individual pedals? Absolutely not. I cannot point to any multi-effect where the sounds are better than the units that they are attempting to emulate. However, they are space savers. They are convenience machines, and they
Money
can take
savers.
the place of a lot of things, and money savers too. And they have their place. I'm not against using them. I have some that do multiple effects in one unit. And, if whatever's making you happy, go for it. Don't let it stand in your way. Until next time.
all right.
See you
ya.
guys.